It's really good to be here. I'm going to read you a bedtime story because I have prepared remarks, so bear with me. I want to thank Nathan for that lovely introduction, and also Chris and all the organizers, and it really is my pleasure to come speak to you today. I don't know how much interaction you've had with the Department of Commerce in the past, but I want you to know you're definitely on our radar, and that's why they sent me for the whole week. It's not my first NewSpace, but it is my first trip to Seattle, and I'm really enjoying it. So some of you know me, some of you don't. Some may even have read things I've written or heard me wax fantastic before. I want to assure you that the values that have underpinned my work are what led me to this new phase with the Department of Commerce and the Office of Space Commerce. I'm a lawyer and a complete legal geek, and I can tell you that this is a very exciting time to be involved in the evolution of space law and effective regulation and norms development at the intersection of hard and soft science. We are at a critical point in the evolution of our industry. Remote sensing, telecommunications, launch and reentry, regulations in all of these fields are going through a recalibration to better serve industry needs, government objectives, all while honoring international obligations and relationships. So, I know that you probably have questions, or maybe this audience doesn't, about Commerce's role in Space Policy Directives 2 and 3. And I'm going to get to what we're doing. I will get to our work implementing these, but some of our tasks really do herald an important juncture in our evolution. 35 years ago, what had been a government function was opened up to the U.S. private sector with the Commercial Space Launch Act of 1984. Now, we sit at the cusp of another important transition, from DoD to a civil entity in providing space situational awareness data and space traffic management decision aids to non-governmental users of space. So I am going to tell you more about that, but first, please indulge my love of history. I think it'll give you some perspective about who we are and why. One of the first things I found as I wandered lost around the enormous Herbert Hoover building, which is now where I have my office, was a book about commerce's history, its origins. And I want to share with you some of what I learned because it really opened my eyes. There's a foundation in this legacy which really serves as ballast to some of our current initiatives for space commerce and the space sector writ large. The Department of Commerce was first established in 1903. It included a Bureau of Corporations, not hard to figure, but also a Bureau of Navigation, a Lighthouse Board, Steamboat Inspection Services, a Bureau of Statistics, a Bureau of Standards, and a Bureau of Manufacturers. The Lighthouse Board has its beginnings in the Lighthouse Act in 1789, the 9th Act of the First Congress, and it was the first Public Works Act way back in this country's early days. Its legacy continues in today's Department of Commerce. Navigation has expanded to include space-based precision navigation and timing. We operate a fleet of satellites and maintain the Space Weather Prediction Center and provide other atmospheric data products. Those early 20th century initiatives for standards and statistics continue today in NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. The department's statutory mandate is to foster, promote, and develop foreign and domestic commerce. This is clearly articulated in its mission to create the conditions for economic growth and opportunity. We do this by promoting innovation, you guys, entrepreneurship, you guys, competitiveness, more about you. And this is where I go off script, and that's why they give me one, now you understand. And stewardship, informed by world-class scientific research and information. We provide the data necessary to support commerce and our constitutional democracy. And we foster innovation by setting standards and conducting foundational research and development. All of these competencies are particularly relevant to the space sector today. So how does this overarching mission flow into the Office of Space Commerce? OSC and our space commerce interests have very high visibility within the department. In the U.S. Department of Commerce Strategic Plan for 2018 to 22, Strategic Objective 1.1 is expand commercial space activities for the whole department. It's top billing. Before I speak to what we're currently busy with, I'd like to share a bit about the roots of the Office of Space Commerce. One thing I've learned since stepping into this post is that more folks than I realized have worked in various incarnations of OSC over the years. We've been here for a while. From 1988 to 1996, the office operated under different department organizational orders. It was called the Office of Space Commerce then, as now, but it was within the Office of the Secretary. From 1996 to 2005, it had been named first the Office of Air and Space Commercialization, and then the Office of Space Commercialization within the Technology Administration. In 2005, still called the Office of Space Commercialization, the office was established as a unit of NOAA's, which is the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. I love that, the sea in the sky. And within their National Environmental Satellite and Information Service. And I usually talk in acronyms, and I'm really trying to give you the full-blown what these things actually stand for. It was the principal unit. It was coordinating space commerce policy activities within NOAA, but also within the entire department. And Department Organizational Order 25-5 delineated some very, very clear policy goals at that time. Those goals became a statutory grant of authority in 2015 in the Space Launch Competitiveness Act. The office was renamed the Office of Space Commerce, and in addition, statutory authority was given to the director of the office to implement OSC objectives and goals. I believe many of you have had the pleasure of meeting Director Kevin O'Connell. He's been in his post a bit over a year. Well, what authorities do the office and its director have as per the CSLCA? True to the department's overarching mandate to foster and promote, so too is OSC directed to foster conditions for economic growth and technological advancement of the U.S. space commerce industry. Foster conditions for economic growth and technological advancement of our industry. It sounds to me like a lot of what we've been talking about and will be talking about this week. We're mandated to help you, to innovate, to flourish, to thrive. OSC is to coordinate space policy within the department, to represent the department in developing U.S. policies, and to negotiate with other countries to promote U.S. space commerce. We are to promote advancement of U.S. geospatial technologies that involve sensing and data and analytics related to space commerce. These data and analytic capabilities are very important to space situational awareness and space traffic management. We're to work with interagency working groups, and we are, and provide support to the federal government organizations working on space-based precision navigation and timing. In a nutshell, foster, coordinate, and promote. Most, if not all of you, are aware of the current discussions about elevating OSC to bureau status in the Office of the Secretary. This would level the field for us when performing our coordination functions within the department, as well as within the interagency. We need this to help us properly leverage the entire department on behalf of industry interests. Space is intrinsic to our nation's economic growth. We need space industry interests represented at the highest levels of executive branch discussion. This institutional change in structure will help us do that going forward. Again, this change will help us to help you. We are your voice. The director has some specific authorities as well, promoting investment in space activities and conducting workshops and seminars. So far, we've held 3, one on investment, another on insurance, and just a few weeks ago, we partnered with the Department of State to host a Space Enterprise Summit, engaging industry and the entire, not the entire international community, but as many as we could get to DC. The director helps commercial providers work with the U.S. government and advocates for industry within the executive branch. He makes sure that commercial capabilities are used effectively and efficiently by the federal government, and that the U.S. government doesn't compete with the private sector for space hardware and services. The director promotes export of space-related goods and services, and to this end has ensured that our office has participated in the export control reform work, which is now underway with state. The director represents the department in the formulation of U.S. policy and international negotiations, ensuring free and fair trade. To give you an example, next week we are engaged in a U.S.-Japan dialogue and discussing all of these, again, in an interagency setting. To this end, Director O'Connell attended UN COPE U.S. Science and Technical Subcommittee in February, spoke at the European Space Policy Institute, also in Vienna, a little bit later, and recently spoke at the Prague Security Studies Institute, discussing the strengthening of international space relationships. But far and above, my favorite directorial mandate is seeking the removal of legal, policy, and institutional impediments to space commerce. It's a tall order. We take it seriously. So how are we going about doing that? Implementing these aspirations and goals? More ways than you can imagine. We've been taking stock of the deep and rich resources contained within the Department of Commerce and maximizing use of these in furtherance of U.S. space commerce in a safe and sustainable manner, and in ways that will benefit the entire space sector. You know, I'm going off script again. We're a little bit like a startup ourselves. We don't have a whole lot of people, although it's more than just Kevin and Jason Kim. But I think at this point right now we're up to like 11 and almost 12 people. But we really, you know, we all multitask. We're very passionate. We get very involved. So we really have to mine the resources that are in the department writ large as a result of that, and we have gotten really good. So somebody made a comment earlier today about how startups were more resilient because they were already used to being lean and mean, and I have to say that's us. That's the Office of Space Commerce. Okay, now I'm going back on the script. Okay. First, we've been expanding the office. Interesting, huh? I'm a good example of that. We sent a gentleman out to Vandenberg just this last week, and he's going to be our lead out there. He is a current Commerce employee with extensive SSA experience, both with us at DOC, but also at DoD. And that's in fulfillment of Space Policy Directive 3, which heretofore I will start referring to as SPD3. So now you know the acronym, right? As we transition between our two departments in providing SSA data. We also brought on a Presidential Innovation Fellow with experience at DARPA on the Hallmark Space Domain Situational Awareness Program. And the two of them have been hard at work developing evaluation criteria. We've been participating on the Interagency Working Group to update the U.S. government orbital debris mitigation standard practices as per SPD 3 Goal B. So somebody asked before if NASA was involved in orbital debris. Yes, NASA has the lead on that task, just to let you know. In fact, that interagency working group is going on right now. It goes on a weekly basis, and so there's a very robust discussion about those issues at that level. We are working with NIST to mine existing practices and standards that are pertinent to orbital activities. Okay, I'm almost there. And to create a landscape review. We recently presented this to our colleagues at the FAA Office of Commercial Space Transportation, and we're collaborating with them on Goal F of SPD3. And we've also started working with ANSI, which is the American National Standards Institute, to figure out how to formalize some of these standards and practices that already exist, how we can, streamline them, make them, tighten them up, and then address the places that we don't have standards and practice and take these things and bring them forward in a more formal way. We have an International Trade Administration Advocacy Center, and it helped 24 space company projects around the globe get contracts, so that's something that you can know that that's there for you. I'm going to start zipping through this because 5 minutes isn't long. But just to let you know, the contracts that they were able to help garner, they totaled more than $4.3 billion as of 6 months ago. And we have more than 20 more projects in the pipeline, and those are valued at right around $3 billion. So if this is something that you have a project and you want to do something with it somewhere else in the world, you should reach out to us. OSC recently showed leadership in standing an interagency working group on orbital debris mitigation requirements for the private sector. So I just mentioned a U.S. government orbital debris mitigation standard practices initiative. That is sort of the foundational work, and then that we and our friends over at AST, the Office of Commercial Space Transportation, are also tasked with figuring out how then to apply that in the private sector in a way that isn't onerous, but addresses the problem and doesn't just kick it up down the road. Another great example of innovation is the U.S. approach to space situational awareness, which is outlined in SPD3, and it's now underway. So, starting from the very clear premise that we have to improve upon the status quo, we seek to build a system that can accommodate diverse data sets, some of which are still emergent. OSC is working on the Open Architecture Data Repository, the OADR. We look forward to the experimental copy of the Unified Data Library that the Air Force Research Laboratory is ready to provide to us, and I mean the MOU is this close, because this is the first building block of our OADR. The UDL is a state-of-the-art platform which is going to help us bring US-provided SSA data forward, leveraging cloud practices and modern warning approaches. I'm down to 1 minute. Wow, I thought I had 30 minutes. What happened? Okay, so clearly we've been busy. I also want to mention to you that we haven't forgotten SPD2. So we've been streamlining our remote sensing licensing requirements in our NPRM. And we really understand that the cadence of regulatory reform has been very difficult to keep up with. But I want to just sort of lodge my plea to all of you to insert yourself in the process. I mean, yesterday was the last day for comments on the NPRM for remote sensing, but I think you still have time on launch, if I'm not mistaken. I know Kelvin's here. And I invite you to make sure that your voice is in there, or at least that you stay on top of the discussion, because this is a really good civics lesson, if nothing else, but also a way to help shape the law as it goes forward. I mentioned that our department represents a wealth of expertise. It does. But we are also aware of the fact that, I'm going off script again because I have little time, our space workforce needs more than just engineers and lawyers. It needs all kinds of people. And so we like to believe that we are like a dashboard. If you have a good idea and you're not sure what to do, where to go, who to speak to, get in touch with us, okay? See me, find me offline, I'll give you my card, because we want to serve sort of as a dashboard and help hook you up. Because we're going to get there if we keep working together, okay? Thank you. Do I have time for questions? Yes? Or did I manage to dodge the bullet?
Given that some adversaries of the United States are kind of also trying to create this STM network, is there any justification, or is the OSC working on justifications to go sole sourcing instead of RFP route for partners for the STM?
Well, we had a request for information back in April, and its comment period first was extended to May 23rd, and then we took it past. In fact, we have an ex parte mechanism that was in the actual RFI itself, which allows people to present their ideas either in person or just by submitting. And that button is still active on the regulations.gov website, so I invite you to go there. So some of the submissions did come from other countries, and we certainly are inviting those conversations. And we're getting involved in some experimental projects to make sure that our data is our sensors rather are interoperable. So I don't think we're looking at a single sole source. We're looking at a lot of ideas, and right now we're thinking out of the box just like you are. Nobody else? Yes. Okay. Here we go.
Hey, thank you. Really quick on the orbital debris touch that you touched on there. The FCC also has authority over this as well. Could you characterize how you work together, how you determine what rules are being made where, and how you coordinate with international bodies as well?
Yeah, so this is early days, and actually when the FCC put out their NPRM, my office and the department put in their comment that there should actually be an interagency discussion about this, because they are an independent agency, so they're a little outside of where the rest of us sit. However, we need to make sure that, first of all, that we're not all coming up with different things, and we're going to confuse industry. And remember, we're trying to remove legal and policy and institutional impediments, and that would be one. So what we did was we stood an interagency working group. The FCC participates, AST participates. We're in there. These are early days. This is the time for discussion, and I think that's real, with everybody respecting one another's authorities, that which they do have. We all still need to be in concert and figuring out what the minimum standards, the baseline would be going forward. Because if we don't, it hurts us all. Yes?
What powers do you get exactly if you go from an office to a bureau, and how will that help make things better?
What it does, first of all, is we're not inside of NOAA, which is one of the entities that we are also tasked with, or mandated, directed. We have to coordinate, and so it's a little awkward to do it from there. It also allows us to draw upon all the resources at such time that we don't have a secretary that has really made space a primary objective, as I mentioned. That could change, and changes in leadership often herald changes in priorities. But if we're a bureau, then we still can mine all of these resources, and they are plentiful. I mean, even the census, we won't go into the thing that happens every 10 years. We're going to talk about the fact that the Bureau of Census is always there, and it's always mining data. And there's all kinds of information that comes out of it. We have the Bureau of Economic Analysis, and we have all kinds of studies. One study that we're working on right now is, a lot of times when we talk about, the $1 trillion space economy, the half a trillion dollar space economy. So figuring out what's actually, what we want to know, what is the methodology? How did you get to that number? So, so a lot of times it's aerospace, and we want to kind of know, well, what is like space-based? Some of the different, eye charts that we've looked at today and yesterday. And so, that study's going on because we have those resources within the Department of Commerce. So being a bureau allows us to draw upon that with much greater ease and much greater consistency. It's institutional consistency or continuity, and that's good for everybody because, again, we are your advocate. I mean, that's what that's what we're here to do, and as a bureau, we can do that better. It gives us also a much more level voice when we're in interagency. Stop. I'm being told that's it. No more questions. Okay, you're cut off. So am I. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.